Hey everybody, it's Joe from greenlightsound.com, and today we're going to take a look at the BX console AMEK 9099, new from Brainworx through Plugin Alliance, which is based upon the Rupert Neve-designed AMEK 9098i master console, originally released in late 1999. And this plugin kind of takes its place alongside the BX console N as a model of a newer analog recording console, as opposed to the older SSL, API, and Neve styles that Plugin Alliance has. Because it's newer, it's kind of a complex channel strip, has some newer features that aren't in the older style consoles. It's got a few plugin-only features as well that we'll kind of talk about as we go through the controls. So let's get right to the controls. Starting on the top left, you've got your high pass and low pass filters. Click the buttons to turn them on and off. Fully sweepable from 20 to 300 Hertz for the high pass filter, or hitting this button 60 to 900 Hertz. On the low pass filter, 4.5K to 30K, or 1.5 to 10K with that button. These two buttons are plug-in only features. You can filter out the input signal, filter post dynamics, or filter into the dynamic sidechain. You've got a gate right here. Engage by clicking that button on. It can be an expander or a gate. When it's an expander mode, you've got a ratio knob down here. In gate mode, it's a hold knob. The other controls are pretty typical: threshold, range. Your attack button here, medium's the default setting. Fast is good for transient heavy material like drums when you want to preserve the transients. Slow is good when you want to kind of cut off that attack at the beginning and kind of have it fade in a bit. Linear changes the release from an exponential style to straight flat linear release. You got a filter section for the gate down here. High pass filter, low pass filter. You can listen to what you're trying to filter out. The high Q buttons add a little resonant bump to it around the cutoff frequency. You can see how that icon changes as you hit it. That leads us into the compression section. It's a VCA style compressor. Typical attack, threshold, release, ratio knobs. You can choose hard knee or soft knee compression. There's an auto release feature, which is really nice. This AMBNC or ambience button, when you push that, the output signal is the difference between the compressed signal and the input signal. You need some compression going on for this button to actually do anything. Right below the VCA compressor, we've got a limiter. Limiter has pretty common controls: threshold, release, a fast attack button, but pretty unique, a clip button as well to add some soft clipping in. And if you have this fast attack, you get even harsher clipping going on when you want to add that clip in. Makeup gain, of course, and a mix knob for the limiter, which is huge. This is really actually a big feature in this plugin because you can smash stuff with the limiter and parallel process it in to thicken things up a bit. Over to the EQ section here, we've got a high frequency section. It can be shelving or peak. A button to turn it on or off. Typical frequencies of 2.K to 21K, plus or minus 18 dB. And this sheen button, which is pretty cool. You can change your shelf from pretty hard shelf to a more gentle slope. If we jump over to Plugin Doctor, you can see exactly what it does. I'm going to push up the high frequency. That's sheen on. Very gentle slope. Sheen off. Much more aggressive, much more steep. Sheen back on. For the high mid band here, we've got on and off button, whether it's in or not. You can change the frequency selection from 500 to 4.5K to 1K to 9K. Makes it pretty versatile, these two middle channels here. And a unique notch filter here, which only cuts. You can see 0 to negative 19 dB. Jump back over to Plugin Doctor. Hit that notch. You can see the notch is pulling out whatever frequency we want. You can tighten up the notch, make it a lot wider. Typically, you're going to have pretty tight notches. And sweep around to wherever you need to cut out whatever offending frequency is there. The low mid section also has a notch filter. You have it divided by two buttons, so 100 to 1K or 50 to 500 Hertz. Again, bandwidth and gain, pretty simple. The low frequency section, you've got shelving or peak filter. Selectable frequencies, plus or minus 18 dB, but this glow button down here. So I'm going to jump back over to Plugin Doctor, move this over. We'll have a shelf going right here. That's with the glow in. Look how gentle of a slope that is and how high it is. I'll jump it back a little bit in frequency versus that. So we've got a cutoff that's pretty steep, slightly resonant, and a much more gentle slope there. We have an EQ in button to turn the EQ on and off. An auto listen for monitoring specific bands when you click on them, an EQ routing for pre-compressor gate, post-compressor gate, or into the sidechain of the compressor gate section. On the master section on the right-hand side, we've got our input gain on the top right here. V-gain adds more noise, THD adds more saturation. We've got our channel numbers for tolerance modeling technology. If you've never tried a Brainworx channel strip plugin before, This TMT technology they use actually has the stereo channels be slightly different from each other and specific mono instances be different from each other. So there's 72 virtual channels of a console here, with each one being slightly different, like they would be in a real console due to manufacturing tolerance differences in the components used to build the console. So if you jump back to Plugin Doctor here, and you can see that glow on that bottom shelf we had, if I start cycling through the TMT, you'll see the left and right channels, represented by the pink and blue lines, change a bit. So I go through all these different model channels, a slight change here. They can become a little bit more obvious when you have a peak filter like that. You see those left and right channels changing around slightly as I cycle through the different model channels of the console. And that's great for creating some kind of analog style separation in the mix by having those slight variations. So instead of just one modeled console channel, you've got 72. So if you got the full desk laying out in front of you. A phase reverse button over here, a mute button. This stereo mode changes that from the tolerance modeling technology with the two different left and right channels to the left and right being exactly the same digital style. You can have one random channel or all the channels be random in a mix. Your meter here in the middle can be changed between input or output metering. You've got a mono maker knob, which is not in the original console down here, and a stereo width knob as well, and on and off buttons for those. You've got a VU meter on the left where 0 is equal to negative 10 dBFS. And you've got a ppm meter on the right where 0 dB is equal to negative 20 dBFS. You can change that though. If you click on the logo on the bottom left, you can change the default settings or the settings for each plugin version to whatever amount you want for 0 dB on those 2 meters. You can also set the current UI style as the default. I prefer this new one, but if you go to use, add some scuffs, some dirt around the knobs, some scratches. I prefer the new, like I said. You've got your meters for the gate expander, the compressor, and the limiter right down here. On the top bar, you've got an undo redo, GUI size, A, B, C, D, different states you can save the plugin in. And this is really cool because you can automate these and have different sections of the song with different processing. So A, for example, could be your verse, B could be your chorus, automate between those two. That's much easier than trying to automate all the different parameters in the plugin. Got a copy and a paste, reset to default settings, THD all, adjust the harmonic distortion for all the plugins in the session. VGain all does the same thing for noise. You've got a option to solo the mid or side band in a stereo mode, and your output fader in the bottom right, and that pretty much covers all the controls. There are a lot of them, it's pretty complex, but once you start using it, you kind of get the hang of it quickly. So I did a really quick drum mix using the BX Console AMEK 9099, and in this one, I'm going to start with processing off, no processing on at all. Then I'm going to pop the plugin back on for all the drum elements, processed only with this console. So here it is, off first. Take a look up here, you'll see when I toggle it on. So most of the processing was pretty simple, typical EQ and compression moves. But one of the really cool features that you can do with this is use the limiter to thicken things up really nicely. Let's take a look at the rack tom first. Here's the rack tom with no processing at all. And with processing. But one of the cool things you can do here is use this limiter, like I said, to thicken it up. So if I take the limiter out, and if I put that limiter back in and dial up the mix, you can really hear what that clipper does. That distortion is really nice to dial back a little bit with the mix knob. Limiter out, and back in. This seems like a really trivial part, but taking something like a tambourine that's really transient heavy and putting that limiter in can really thicken it up too. Here it is without limiting. And you'll see when I put it in. To make you hear it a little bit better, let me turn it up. And you can pull back on that mix amount as much as you want, and that really allows you to thicken things up nicely. So the next thing we're going to look at is a piano part here. I've got no processing going on. I'm just going to kind of go through the channel strip as I would if I was mixing this piano part by itself, kind of see what we can get with the processing here. So just kind of going through all the various controls of the plugin, I went from this sound, bypassed, and then I'll engage it as it plays. You can hear what we did with the processing. Just shaped it really nicely, really simple to use once you get the hang of the controls here. So there it is, the BX Console AMEK 9099, new from Brainworx. Highly recommended, really fun channel strip to work with. If you have any questions or comments, let me know in the comment section down below. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't done so already so we can keep you in the loop as to what's coming up next, and I'll see you in the next one.